I thank the member for Capricorn. The question is the amendment be agreed to, and I call the member for Hunter.
And I thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. And it's fortuitous that I be here to follow the member for Capricornia and to deal with some of the propositions she has put forward. I say this very clearly to members of the National Party and Liberals representing rural and regional seats, that it takes more in our electorates than rebadging Labor's spending priorities and claiming them as their own. You never hear them talk about all the money that was flowing to rural and regional Australia, which now does not flow because of the early decisions of the coalition government. Regional Development Australia funding is the perfect example. I can cite cases in my own electorate. There's $7 million that should have gone to the refurbishment of the Maitland Mall, for example, which was set in stone by the former Labor government, went through a cabinet process, and I was part of that process, was determined on the basis of recommendations of the department, and yet was not honoured by the incoming Abbott government. Now, every time Minister Truss approaches the dispatch box during question time, much to the ire of the member for Grainler, the former Minister for Transport, he cites projects the National Party or the coalition is rolling out in rural and regional Australia, in terms of roads in particular, projects he takes credit for, but of course were projects selected, determined and funded by the former Labor government. The truth is that this coalition government has not spent one additional cent on any of those projects, not one additional cent which wasn't already planned to be spent by the former Labor government and fully budgeted by the former Labor government. So let us not hear the rebadging. Please let us hear what is the plan, the coalition plan for rural and regional Australia. Where is their vision for rural and regional Australia? Where is their strategy to ensure that rural and regional Australia receives a fair amount of attention as compared to our city countries when it comes to the priorities of this government? Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, let's talk about some of the more bizarre decisions that have been made recently by this coalition government that run contrary to the interests of rural and regional Australia. Let's go through all those budget measures: cuts in education, cuts in health, GP co-payments, for example, which seems to have gone away for the moment, but we will see where that takes us, because I suspect there's another hit coming on patients which will only be rebranded and will come in a different form. Fuel increases on motorists in rural and regional Australia. All these budget measures impact adversely and disproportionately on people living in rural and regional Australia, including those who live in my electorate of Hunter. But let's take an issue of like the recent decision to lower the thresholds on the Foreign Investment Review Board proposals. Now, this is populist politics at its worst. We do know that there is concern, particularly in rural and regional Australia, about the growing levels of foreign investment in our agricultural land and our agriculture investments. The secret to this, of course, Mr Deputy Speaker, is to build public confidence in foreign investment, because we know from the Greening Pastures report, thanks, of course, to one of the other side's own members, that by 2050 in agriculture we'll need about $500 billion worth of investment to fully capitalise on the opportunities presented by what I call the dining boom. That is the ever-increasing demand for high-quality, clean, green food in Asia. Now, let's say the Greening Pastures report was not all that robust. Let's just accept for a moment that it's not $500 billion, but it's $250 billion by 2050. It is axiomatic that, as a small island continent with 23 million people, with a limited savings capacity, that most of those funds will by necessity come from foreign sources, as has always been the case in Australia. Our country is built on foreign capital, effectively. Iconic projects like the Harbour Bridge being the perfect example. So we should be welcoming of foreign investment in agriculture and in agriculture business. We desperately need that foreign capital, and we need to put "we are open for business" sign out. Otherwise, thanks to the member for Hume, Angus Taylor, Hume, is it? We will have a shortfall. We will not be in a position to capitalise on those opportunities in Asia. So instead of building public confidence in foreign investment, as we first proposed to do with a register which would allow people everywhere to see who is investing, in what, where and how much they're investing, so people can understand and have confidence in the system, instead of doing that, they go out and fiddle with the thresholds, taking the thresholds from $250,000 to $15 million in the case of agricultural land. We still don't know what the agribusiness threshold will be because they haven't guesstimated that yet. They haven't been able to agree on that. I suspect coalition members are still arguing. The Dries in the cabinet want one figure, and the more progressive, I'll call them, I think they'd like that term, want another figure. So they make the announcement, but say, don't worry, we'll work out the figure for agribusiness somewhere in the future. Meanwhile, investors in Asia and elsewhere are saying, what the? What the? They don't know what the rules are. And by the way, Mr Deputy Speaker, there is no legislation. There is no law. It will be retrospective, though, I'm told, when the law comes into this place. But meantime, investors right around the world, in a world where competition for global capital is intense, don't know what the rules are in Australia. They don't know what the rules are. So guess what, Mr Deputy Speaker? They're looking in South Africa, they're looking in South America, they're looking at Australia. They all have great potential to provide yields well beyond what an investor might get domestically in, say, China. They're looking at the three opportunities and they're going, Australia?
The Hicks are in control.
Australia's no good to me. I don't know what the rules are. The thresholds are ridiculous. We've had a look. They're saying we've had a look. The government hasn't provided any additional resources to Treasury to deal with this flood of applications Treasury is now going to receive as a result of these threshold reductions. So it's just all too hard. We'll go to South America instead. Now, the member for Hughes, I challenge him to come in here today on this appropriation speech and share for the House. What, Hume? No, sorry, Hume? Hume?
Hughes. He's a
Hughes? Angus Taylor.
Hughes.
Hume. I said a Hume, I thought. I think you misheard. I challenge the member for Hume to come here on this appropriation debate and tell us what he thinks of the new foreign investment thresholds, as much as we understand them at this stage, because he was the co-author of that report that rang the alarm bell, which said we must be inviting a foreign capital if we are to properly grow our agriculture businesses, to fully capitalise on the dining boom and to allow agriculture to drive wealth in this country in the future. I suspect the member for Hume won't come in. I suspect he won't come in because he absolutely agrees with me. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, those who understand the FIRB process know this. It's just a board. The FIRB's a board designed to build some public confidence in the system, to allow people to understand it's not just the Treasury dealing with these matters, but there's a board of non-salaried people from all walks of life, and I pay tribute to all of them, including Mr Secker, a former member of this place, and that's designed to give people some confidence that other people from the community with some expertise have a role to play. But we all know how these boards work, Mr Deputy Speaker. Once a month they get a list of proposals. Treasury says we've got 20 proposals put before you. More often than not, in fact almost all the time, they say we recommend they all be approved. It's like going to a council meeting and getting your agenda. Some of us in this place will be familiar with that process. The board rarely challenges Treasury. And in any case, Mr Deputy Speaker, well before the board gets its papers, if there is any controversial proposal in there, it's already in the newspapers and the Treasurer's already all over it. Ultimately, it's the Treasurer who determines these matters if there's any controversy around them whatsoever. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, what's the threshold about? I mean, if the Treasurer is concerned about a proposal, if a proposal's sparked concern in Treasury, it doesn't matter whether it's $1 million or $250 million. The Treasury is onto it, the Treasurer is onto it, and the matter will be dealt with appropriately. Hopefully, well handled by the Treasurer in a way that maintains and further builds confidence in the system. So the threshold is a stunt. But I wouldn't care if it was just a stunt designed to bolster the stocks of a struggling National Party in particular, but it's going to do so much harm, Mr Deputy Speaker. Well, I'm going to take the interjection from the the Parliamentary Secretary opposite, because he says,
and he's finance too.
We're in government. Yeah, this is the point. There's another mob in government too, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's called the Baird government. Another coalition government. And guess what?
A good government.
They're up for election on March 28. That's why at the moment you are seeing extraordinary backdowns in all ranges of public policy. Minister Hunt goes to the Minister for Agriculture's electorate last Friday and he announced he's stopping the clock on the Shenhua coal mining development. After all this time, I invite the Minister for Agriculture to come in here right now and debate me right now on these issues. Minister, are you listening, Minister? Come in, come on down. Let's have a debate. Let's have a debate on the Shenhua mine. Let's have a debate on foreign investment in agriculture in this country. But Minister Hunt went to the minister's electorate. How much money were you putting on that? Minister Hunt accompanied Minister Joyce to his own electorate and says, after all these months, if not years of debate on the Shenhua mine, 3 weeks from the state election, they say, we're stopping the clock. They stopped the clock, all right, until March 29. That's when they've stopped the clock till March 29. So I appreciate the Parliamentary Secretary's intervention. At the moment, we are seeing extraordinary admissions of fault and backdowns and stunts from this government for one primary purpose: to save Mike Baird in New South Wales, who we know, Mr Deputy Speaker, as he knows, despite his very significant margin in the Legislative Assembly in New South Wales, is in all sorts of trouble. And he's in all sorts of trouble in all sorts of places. None the least, and members need to listen carefully because they will not believe what I'm about to say, not the least in Upper Hunter. And guess what is the relationship between Upper Hunter and the Minister for Agriculture? They share the area. The Minister for Agriculture is very, very nervous about where Upper Hunter is leading, and the Parliamentary Secretary says, oh, Michael Johnson will win. He, for the benefit of those listening, is the National Party candidate. He's also the bloke that has three times run against me and 3 times lost. So, as a reward, Mr Deputy Speaker, he's being given a safe state seat where my very good friend George Soros is retiring. But guess what, Mr Deputy Speaker? It didn't quite turn out that way, and it appears that Upper Hunter isn't so safe after all. That's why they're spending so much money. That's why they're spending their young guns in to campaign, and that's why Minister Hunt was in Barnaby Joyce's electorate and the electorate of Upper Hunter last week, because they are worried, Mr Deputy Speaker. And the Labor Party has an excellent candidate in the name of Martin Rush. He's the Mayor of Muswellbrook and has been since, I think, 2008. Champion guy, doing good things in his local community. And the National Party is on the run, just like they are on the run right around this country. They're on the run for 2 reasons. Because Country Caucus has got them on the run. The Labor Party is putting forward good policies in rural and regional Australia and holding them to account for the way they have walked away from what they would describe as their neutral constituencies. And they are on the run due to their own failings and incompetencies. This is a dysfunctional government. It's having an effect most in rural and regional Australia.
it is catching up with the National Party, and I can promise them one thing: we're going to hunt them all the way to the next federal election.